Hey guys, before we go on with the pod, I did just want to come out and make a quick little video. I did have a conversation with Dr. Mo via video call. Unfortunately, the video did not save over on my end due to some technical issues, but not to worry. The audio that I do have is great, and I was able to go off of that. I did add some visual aids. You are going to see some footage of what Dr. Mo is talking about. Just keep in mind, guys, this is a very sensitive topic to a lot of people. Um, at the end of the day, I'm just trying to bring awareness and I'm just praying for a ceasefire, guys. But sit back. It is a nail biting interview. And again, thank you guys for the support. So, the Conversations with Mo. Today, we do have a very special guest, Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, also known as Dr. Mo. Before we do get into the conversation, I do want to do a little background on him real quick, just to give you guys a quick little thing that he did do and is doing. Dr. Mo is an emergency physician, medicine trainee. He's a humanitarian advocate and former international rugby player. He's actually the first Palestinian to represent UK in international rugby. He is a proud English Australian of Palestinian heritage. Dr. Mo has served on the front lines of Gaza, combining his medical expertise with powerful advocacy for human rights and healthcare in conflict zones. His story is one of resilience, purpose, and impact. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Mo.
Thank you for that introduction. It was a bit of a nice introduction, but yeah, man. Look, I'm just a normal person like everybody else in this struggle. There are so many amazing voices that are advocating for what's going on in Gaza. I was lucky enough to be there twice during this war. I went in June 2024, and I just got back a few weeks ago.
Yes, sir. Now, I do understand that you've been twice over the past year. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So how's the process of trying to get into Gaza?
It's not an easy process to get into Gaza. Obviously, as you can imagine, there's a lot of security checks and there's a lot of resistance of you going in. So, one of the things is you have to, first of all, apply to an NGO that's willing to take you. To get an NGO to take you, they have to look at your CV, they have to have, the appropriate skills. Then once that initially passes, where you get taken in by an NGO, then they send your CV to the World Health Organization, the UN. Usually, there's no problems; they usually clear you. And then after that, you have to go through security clearance through Kogat, and Kogat is the Israeli security that decides who goes in and who goes out of Gaza, and what goes in and what goes out of Gaza. So, that last clearance is usually the hard one. And, the last time that I went, you only get clearance a few hours before you go in. So we had a doctor that flew in from Ireland to Jordan because that's where you cross the border. You cross the border from Jordan into the West Bank, then from there into Israel and then
Hmm.
into Gaza. He got told 5 hours before the bus was leaving that he wasn't allowed in. No reason is ever given why they're not allowed in, but he had to essentially fly all the way from Ireland, take the time off work, book everything off, sort out of his life affairs, only to be told a few hours before that he wasn't allowed to go into Gaza. So that's kind of what happens. There was a team, I think, of 20 doctors that went in the week after us. Only 8 of them got approved, 12 of them got rejected. So, yeah, it's very hard even as a doctor to get into Gaza. So, I was fortunate enough that I managed to make it in twice. So I'm thankful for that at least.
How did they allow you in? Because I was told that if you are from Palestinian heritage, or if you claim to be Palestinian, that the Israeli government was not letting any doctors in that claim to be
I mean,
Palestinian.
I think that the official ruling is if you have Palestinian identification, like whether you were born in Palestine or
Hmm.
your parents have Palestinian identification, like a Hawiyah, which is your Palestinian ID document or
Yeah.
Palestinian passport. And obviously, for me and my family, they were, ethnically cleansed a long time ago from Palestine. I still have family in Palestine, but I was born outside of Palestine. I was born in Mecca and I grew up in the UK. I'm a British and Australian citizen. So, there was nothing really on paper anyway connecting me immediately to Palestine. And that's probably why I got in. But yeah, I mean, it's very unfortunate, that Palestinians aren't allowed in to their own home to serve their own people, you know, even as humanitarian, even in the capacity of humanitarian workers. So yeah, it's very, very difficult.
Doctor, how did you feel when you got the call saying that you were going to be able to get into Gaza?
it's a mixture of emotions, wallah. Like, you're going to the most dangerous place on earth, and you're going to the most dangerous place on earth to be an aid worker. Now, the first time that I went, and my mum's had a hard time. The first time that I went in I was meant to go in May last year. Now, if you remember, in April last year was when the World Central Kitchen workers were killed, when they were bombed. Those 3 cars were bombed individually and they killed the things. So I was meant to go in May, and that created so much anxiety for my mum because there was so blatantly, openly killing foreign aid workers. And there obviously been already a lot of aid workers that were killed already in Gaza, but this was the biggest high-profile case, which was the World Central Kitchen. So I was literally going in a few weeks after that. So there was a lot of tension about going in, and it was obviously quite nerve-wracking going in. And at the time when I was going to go in May, that was the invasion of Rafah, and that's when the Rafah border was closed. And then when the Rafah border was closed, we were meant to be going in through Egypt, through Rafah. So that we were actually the first set of doctors to go in via the Jordanian crossing, via Jordan. So that was a completely
Mm,
different rule set of how we were meant to do it, how we were meant to do our passport checks, all that kind of stuff all changed. What we were allowed to take into Gaza, what weren't allowed to take into Gaza, all of that had changed. So our whole mission had completely changed, very, very quickly for that time. And then the second time I went in during the ceasefire. But the ceasefire had unilaterally been broken, and when the ceasefire had broken, that's obviously when we had the bombing of the UN safe house, the bombing of Nasser Hospital, the bombing of the Turkish hospital that destroyed the only cancer hospital left in Gaza, the bombing of Al-Aqsa Hospital, the execution of those paramedics as well. And there was also the killing of an international doctor, of an Egyptian international doctor as well. All of these things happened while I was there. So you can imagine just how I mean, look, I don't want to play like we're the victims here because we're not, because it's way scarier being a Palestinian. But just imagine as an aid worker where the
mm,
UN safe house was bombed and international UN workers were killed. Doctors were bombed in the hospital. In the hospital, the entire surgical unit at NASA, or most of the surgical unit at NASA, was destroyed because of a missile strike into the hospital. Al-Aqsa Hospital, the facility around it was bombed as well while we were in it. The the uh, the paramedics were executed while we were there, and their bodies were discovered while we were there. All of this is in a very short amount of time. So just and then obviously every day there was bombing all around the hospital. Like literally, you could look outside and you could see the smoke. A couple hundred meters away from the hospital. I think there was even a video I put up where it was literally the missile had hit literally about 50, 70 meters away from the hospital. Like this was every day, things like this. So it was quite intense when you're there to be an aid worker because you just don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the next thing is going to happen, and you don't know when they're going to hit next, and you don't know what's going to happen. So, alhamdulillah, we made it out okay. my mum's feeling a bit better now.
alhamdulillah. Yeah, alhamdulillah, for sure, for sure. How was your very first time in Gaza, the first day when you entered?
you know, the first time I went there was in June last year, and that was the height of the war. That was, when there was the blockade where nothing was coming into Gaza, where there was only about 50 to 100 aid trucks a day going in. So starvation was rampant throughout Gaza. We saw so many kids die from hunger then. And I know right now so many kids are dying from hunger again this time round. But we were seeing that effect in Gaza in June. And I remember we used to see the first day that we arrived, it takes the drive from Jordan to Gaza should only take 3 hours, but because of the security checks and everything else, it takes you about 12 hours. This time round, when we went in, it took us 18
Correct.
hours. It took us 18 hours to get in. And, when we went in to Gaza, we we arrived and we arrived at about 6 o'clock in the evening, right? We'd set off at 6 o'clock in the morning and we arrived about 6 p.m. when we actually got to the European hospital. And I remember there was a mass casualty event when we first arrived, but nobody had survived. So they brought all these bodies to the morgue, and we went to the morgue. And in the morgue, they were trying to identify the bodies. So they were opening up these plastic bags, and family members were going in to identify who was dead, and it was like 12 people. It was like a family of 12 children, women. And I remember, like, you've just arrived in Gaza, and I remember just thinking to myself, subhanallah, we're here. This is it now. This isn't me seeing it on TV. I'm seeing those plastic bags being opened up, and those, you know, mutilated bodies with heads missing, limbs missing, bodies burnt to a crisp, all there right in front of me. And the crying of families was all there. So that was the bit, that really struck. And then the next day in the morning, I started working in the emergency room in the morning, and we had a mass casualty event, and it was children. It was a missile that hit a children's playground. Well, it wasn't a children's playground, but it was where children were playing. You don't know what to call a
Hmm.
playground or not because everything was destroyed, but essentially it was where children were playing. And, we had, all these children brought in. And I remember the first blanket that I opened. And, they bring in these blankets. You know what it's like, those old Arabic blankets that they have in the homes that are nice and
Yeah, yeah,
warm.
absolutely.
So everyone
Yes.
brings in and they carry people
Has the
in these
animals on it like the
blankets.
tigers.
Yeah, yeah, the tigers and the patterns and stuff. And
Yes, sir.
they bought in these blankets, and they would just put them down on the floor in the ER, and you would have to open them up, and you'd have to see who was alive and who was dead. And I remember the first blanket that I opened up, and it was a child with its head missing, and I remember just freezing. And when you see that, it's a small body with a head missing. I think it was like half the head had gone, and the brains were all out. And I remember just freezing in fear, right? I literally froze in fear because, I've worked in the ER. I've seen some very gory things in my time. I've seen some horrific injuries. But when you see a child this mutilated, it it hits you very differently. And that was one of the bits where, I remember just feeling this sense of fear for what this child must have been through for this to happen to them. The pain that must have been caused. Did they die quickly? Or, was it the force of the bomb blew them away, and they had to feel the pain of their limb being blown off, and then their head being open. Like there was that initial fear of just what happened to this child. And then there was the fear of, like, this is happening all around us. So when you see the bombs going off, it becomes more real to you, the fear of these bombs, because you see what these bombs do to people. You see the injuries, the horrificness of it. And that's the bit that really, it's really confronting, when you see that for the first time. And, while this is going on, while they're bringing in these people, you can hear bombs going off in the background. You can hear the drones overhead. And, like, we have this thing in Islam which is just called tawakkul, where it's just like you just leave everything in the hands of Allah, because you just don't know what's going to happen, play by play, step by step, day by day. You just have to ride with the waves.
I can't even imagine what the parents were going through. Um, I just saw recently in a news article that death toll has passed over 52,000.
It's way more. It's way, way more. Because if you look at the Lancet report, which is one of the most respected medical journals, they put it between anything between 180,000 to like 300,000 deaths. And, like, when you're in there in Gaza, you can believe it, because you've got to remember, when the Israeli army went into, like, places like Al Shifa Hospital, and when they go into these hospitals, they destroy all the medical equipment. They destroyed all the dialysis machines at Al Shifa Hospital. Do you know how many people died, from kidney failure because they couldn't get dialysis, because all the dialysis machines were destroyed? I mean, this is, so you just put that, and they're not even counted as part of the death toll of the war. How many children, how many people are stuck under the rubble? How many have died under the rubble? When I used to walk to work from the safe house to Al-Aqsa, we would see bombed out buildings and mosques and stuff like that. And people would tell us there's 20 bodies underneath this building. There's 30 bodies underneath this one. And I'm like, how do you know? Because that's the family, that's our next door neighbors. They were all in that house. We only managed to pull out 12. Three of them survived. The rest are all buried underneath, but they can't get to them because there's no heavy lifting equipment to get to these people under the rubble. So this 50,000 is a massive undercount, because also you've got to remember as well, like, when they're bombing an area, when they're carpet bombing an area, and, like, they've taken siege of a particular area in Gaza, people aren't going to leave their homes to go to the hospital to give the dead body over to the hospital to be counted, and then they take it to be buried. Sometimes they just take it and bury it. And the counting process is you've got to actually identify the body. to count it as someone. You've got to actually have a physical body there to identify it. So how many people arrived and they were just, you see them in plastic bags. You don't even know what's their head, what's their leg, whose organs they are. Sometimes you get a family that have all been, wiped out in a build in an apartment building, and they just bring in the flesh, just limbs and organs, and they essentially go, well, it was a family of four in this apartment, so we've just divided up this flesh into four bags, and that's it, and that's how we bury them. We bury them as four individuals. Like, that's the state of which, that's why the 50,000, it's been stuck on 50,000 since last year. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many more. And like, when you see the casualties that come in on a daily basis, it's horrific. It's horrific what you see. So
And the report also stated that about 17,000 children have passed away. So half of the 52,000 of the death toll have been women and children. Is what they're saying,
it's way,
based on the
way,
results
way,
that
way
I
higher than,
just
I mean,
read.
look, when the population is already 50% children, right? It's 50% children.
Correct.
So
Correct.
when you
Hmm.
bomb a building indiscriminately, right? No matter who you're targeting, if you indiscriminately bomb a building, most likely 50% of that building are just children. You just got to put that down, they're just children. And then how many of those are also women as well? So even just if you want to put ballpark figures, you know what I mean? 75% women and children. And then of the men that get killed, how many of them are just civilians? Add all of that up on top of each other, and you're looking at 90% civilian casualty minimum. And I've seen many reports like that. So it's and then you imagine being a doctor working in an environment like that where you're just seeing constantly every day women and children and with the most horrific injuries. And it's not even the dead that you feel sorry for the most. The people that I felt sorry for the most were the ones that stayed alive, because they would have the most horrific injuries and burns and no medical equipment to deal with these burns, to do proper dressing changes. Like, it was really, really difficult. It's really difficult to deal with all of this. It really, really is. So, you know, I take my hat off to them because they
And
still
just
they
to, and
still
just
survive.
and just to clarify, doctor, you're not a surgeon, correct? That's not your specialty, of
No,
surgery.
so mine is, I'm an emergency physician trainee. So my whole job is when they come to the ER is I got to keep them alive. I got to stop the bleeding. I've got to keep them alive until they get to the operating room. But sometimes for them to get to the operating room might take days just from the amount of casualties and the lack of space that we have. So I would always, when I'd finish my shift in the ER, I would go to the wards and I would go around the wards and I would see patients on the wards, even though it's not my specialty, but it was just anything to give a hand to the doctors there. So yeah, it's tough, man. It's a tough place to go to, and it's a tough place to practice medicine because as much as you do, you feel like there's so much that you couldn't do. So it's tough, man. It really is.
How chaotic were your shifts every day? Were they
I mean, I
every
just
day
didn't
it
have
was
a.
just
I,
nonstop,
did,
or
I just didn't have a timetable. I just didn't have a timetable. I would just work as much as I could. I just would always say to myself, like, I am here and I'm here to work. I'm not here to rest. I'm not here to take a day off. I'm here to work. So I would just work as much as I can. Sometimes I would do a night shift, because people don't travel to the hospital at night unless, there's been a mass casualty event or something like that, because it's quite scary to walk around in the middle of the night with drones everywhere. They'll just shoot you. So, at night time, if there wasn't like a mass casualty event, maybe things would quieten down. So sometimes I'd go to sleep after Fajr. I'd go to sleep at like 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, something like that. I'd go to sleep and I'd wake up at like, 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then I'd go back down to the ER and work again. And it was tough when we were there working because, most of the time I was there was Ramadan. So I was working and doing these long shifts while I was fasting. So it was tough, man. I used to get lightheaded and dizzy all the time, when I was working. But especially when we were doing long shifts, man, it was tough. But for me working in the ER, there's no shift patterns in the ER. In the operating room, maybe it's different, because they have their cases that they deal with and stuff like that. But when you're in the emergency room, it's just work as much as you can, see as many patients as you can, because it's not just the ones that have been hit by missiles that you're trying to see. It's, people who have got diabetes that's been uncontrolled. It's people who've got infections that are uncontrolled. It's people who have fallen, people who, have gunshot wounds, things like that. There's all kinds of people that you see in the OR. The ER, sorry.
How bad? How bad is the blockade seizing medicine from coming in? I mean,
It's honestly, man, we were just, we're limited with the amount of antibiotics we have. We're limited with the amount of sedatives that we have. Like, you have to rationalize everything. You can't give everything that you want to give to somebody. Even when you're sedating people, you don't give them the full amount, that they need, because you need to rationalize it. You don't give the full amount to, that the antibiotics, because we're limited with the type of antibiotics that we have. You can't give the right antibiotics, and sometimes then people die because they're not getting the right antibiotics. There's so much. I remember the first time I was there wasn't even gauze, like tissues even. So it's just it's a tough spot, man. It's a tough gig. It's a tough gig when you go out there, and no matter how I describe it, it's worse when you get there. It's worse than you can ever imagine. And we get to see these people. When the cameras see the injured coming in and it looks awful, and people are, blood pouring out everywhere, maybe a limb missing or something like that, or you see a kid with his head missing and all that kind of stuff. But then when you treat those and you keep those alive, those ones that you have to go see every day on the ward, it's different because you get to know them, you get to know their families, you see them and you watch them die slowly. You watch them die slowly. That's difficult. That's difficult. You know, it's difficult to see because,
what's the
you know,
survival rate out there based?
it's hard to say.
So
It's
on
hard to
average,
say. It's hard to say because, like, we're so overwhelmed, right? They could bring 1,000 doctors in tomorrow and it still wouldn't be enough, right? But the only thing going into Gaza every week is like 20 doctors, 20, 30 doctors a week. And then obviously those that are leaving every week as well. So, like, there's not many coming in. And, you know, you trying to do some work where you're trying to actually statistically try to get exact numbers. You never will. It'll always be undercounted because, people leave the hospital because they feel like they're not getting seen. And sometimes they're not, they just stay on a ward bed maybe for days before someone comes to check on them. So they might go home and they'll die at home, you know. Um, there are people that have been in hospital for weeks, with like really complicated injuries, and they just say, I can't deal with the pain anymore. I'm in so much pain, I can't deal with it because there's no painkillers. I'd rather just go home and die at home than die slowly here. So they go home and die at home. The level of suffering in Gaza is like nothing that you can imagine. These people are dying from every angle that you can think of, whether it's being sniped, whether it's explosions, whether it's collapsed buildings, whether it's starvation, whether it's infectious diseases, whether it's even things like, when I was there in June, the aid trucks, when they would come in, the aid trucks weren't allowed to stop. So the aid trucks would be driving like 60 kilometers an hour. And obviously it's dirt roads and people are living in and amongst the rubble. So these aid trucks, these like 6, 7 ton, 8 ton aid trucks would just hit children. So we used to get children that had been ran over by a massive aid truck, and they would come in with very mangled bodies. From any angle that you could look at it, children were just dying, and it was tough, man. It was really, really tough. Um,
What was the ratio between patients?
um, it wasn't enough doctors. It's not even close. You've got to think about how many doctors have been killed, how many doctors have been injured, how many doctors have fled Gaza, how many doctors are in Israeli prison cells. You know, and then doctors not allowed in. It's tough, man. You've got your work cut out there. If you want to work when you go out there, there's plenty to do. Don't worry about it. There's plenty to do. So yeah, man, it's tough out there. It really is tough. But alhamdulillah, then the resilience of the people in Gaza is something to behold. But I think people get complacent, when we talk about resilience because they go, oh, they're just so resilient in Gaza. They're resilient, but they're also human beings. And they're watching their children starve to death. They're watching their children die in the most horrific ways. Children are watching their parents being blown to bits and burnt alive in front of them. It's tough for all of them. It's tough for all of them. It's not easy. As resilient as they are, we need to alleviate that pain. We need to keep raising our voices for them. We need to keep campaigning for them. We need to keep protesting. Whatever it is, we need to put an end to the suffering that they're going through in Gaza, especially the children.
Such a tough situation. It's just something that I have a little boy and I can't even fathom what I would do if anything even happened to him.
Yeah.
Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah.
I mean, it's like I remember like when the father came in, there was a headless child, and he was like 3 years old, and his head had been blown off, and I remember just thinking to myself like, what happens to this father? How does he recover from this? Because as a father, you're meant to be the protector of your children, right? And to see your child die in the most horrific way, right? I mean, how many marriages are destroyed because a child died, by an accident, whether they drowned in the pool or something like that, and the relationship just can't tolerate, that. Imagine watching all your children burnt alive in front of you, and you can't do anything about it. What does that do to you as a man? Imagine as a child watching your father executed in front of you, because we met many children like that who told us those stories. I mean, look, when the media will be allowed into Gaza and foreign journalists are allowed into Gaza, I'm telling you, there are going to be so many horrific stories that you will hear about, so many horrific things that hasn't even touched the news. You're going to hear about it. And that's why when this war is over and foreign media get to go in and you get to interview these people, you will see there'll be some chilling stories. There really will. And in 10 years' time, the whole world is going to be saying that they were against this war, that they didn't want this, and they were always against it. But trust me, this is, we don't have 10 years to wait. These people need help right now.
Are you planning on going for a third time, Doc? Or
Inshallah, man, I'm going to apply to go. Obviously, because I've been raising my voice and, a bit of a social media presence now, it'll be hard for me to get back in, but obviously I'll keep campaigning. But what I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to campaign and get a children's hospital into Gaza. So I've been working on some designs.
I was going to touch that next.
Yeah, so I've been working on some designs. I'm working on some proposals, speaking to foundations and large donors to get it done. I've been in talks with figures from the Australian government. Um, so yeah, so things are moving in a positive direction with that. But you know, I'm trying to do the impossible, which is get a hospital in Gaza. It's very hard to do that, but it's the only thing that's keeping me going because I would probably cry every night thinking about the things that I saw if I didn't know that I was trying to do something positive. So that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm campaigning for. That's why I'm talking on all these podcasts and doing all of these interviews. And do you know what I mean? I'm just trying to get the word out there that, we're trying to do something positive for the children in Gaza.
How would that process be started? I mean, of course, you'd have to wait post-war in order to even do
We don't
anything
have to
based
wait
on
for
that,
post-war.
correct?
We don't have to wait for
Or would
post-war.
you
We
just
can
do a
get
field
this in.
hospital for the time being?
Yeah, we're going to do a field hospital. But, look, I don't want to give too much of the details away just yet until we get everything finalized. But, we have a good concept. We have a good idea of how it's going to be done. It's been done before. So we know that it can be done. We're just in the process of speaking to the donors, getting the money for it, getting the political will for it. And then, inshallah, then it just becomes a case of, having to try and negotiate to get it past the borders because eventually they're going to have to let something in, and hopefully, inshallah, it'll be this hospital that we can get in for the children. So,
Inshallah.
that's what we're trying to do. So, hopefully, we can get it in, and hopefully, we can, yeah, hopefully, it can be the start of many things coming into Gaza, and hopefully, this war can stop soon. And look, I have to be an optimist. You have to be an optimist because I felt so helpless when I was there in Gaza. Having children die in front of you is difficult. Having children die in your arms and you can't do anything about it is difficult. So this is my way of trying not to feel helpless is by trying to do something, even if it seems impossible. I'm at least going to try. And the hardest thing that's been about all of this is actually a lot of the time the pro-Palestine movements themselves. They're the ones that are very negative about all of this. They're the ones that are like, oh, it can't be done. What's the point in trying? They're just going to bomb it anyway, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, look, maybe, but I got to try at least. I got to try and get this hospital in for the kids. I've got to try and give them something. Do you know what I mean? So we're going to keep fighting.
Inshallah, absolutely.
We're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep going as far as we can, as much as we can. And inshallah, we can get it done. And I believe we can. I believe we can. I believe we have the right strategy. I believe we have, the right people behind me. We can do this. We just need to. We need to have a little bit of faith in Allah, and we need to have a bit of tawakkul.
I mean, did you see a major difference based on you being there in 2024 compared to this time in 2025?
Just the ferocity of the bombs were different this time. There was no rules this time. Like I said to you before, like everything was just getting bombed. Paramedics were getting executed. Ambulances were being buried. UN safe houses were bombed. Hospitals were bombed. There was no rules. The bombings were intense. They were bombing tent cities. They were bombing buildings with women and children. Like there was just no rules. There was whatever, you know, mask that was on has slipped off completely now. I mean, you saw images of those people flying through the air. Do you remember those? When have we ever seen that during the war? But when we were there, I mean, that's just the ferocity of the bombs. That's just the ferocity of the bombs. So, you know, Allah ainhum.
Where does
Inshallah.
accountability going to? I mean, at this point, where can accountability be held? I mean,
Well, look, justice for things like this, right? Yeah, it'll never happen overnight. Because it's not even just about justice for this; it's about justice for the last 75 years. The Nakba, the ethnically cleansing almost a million people. What about them and the lives that they've had to live in refugee camps or in the neighboring countries? The Palestinian families that have been relocated all around the world that have had to build themselves up from scratch with nothing. The ones that have lost their farms. What about the justice for them? The justice isn't just for Gaza. The justice is for everything that's happened in the last 75 years. So don't focus too much on the justice for Gaza. Let's focus on the justice for all of it. And, look, Palestinians are a very forgiving people. And, you know, if we have a free Palestine one day where we can go to our homes and live in peace, we leave the justice on the day of judgment. You know what I mean? If we don't get it in this life, on the day of judgment, we'll have our justice. But all we really want is just peace and be able to live in our homes and look after our children and have the same dreams as everybody else. That's all Palestinian people want. And inshallah, 2 years ago, I wouldn't believe it would have happened in my lifetime. But now I believe it can happen in my lifetime. And, you know, you've just got to keep going because if those people in Gaza refuse to give up, we can't be the ones that give up. If the people in Gaza refuse to lose hope, we can't lose hope. We don't have a right to lose hope. So just keep going, take it day by day. Take it day by day. That's all I'm doing. All I do is just take it day by day. I can't take it week by week. I can't take it month by month or year by year because I wouldn't be able to survive. I just take it day by day. Any positive news, any positive progression, we change someone's mind. That's all I'm trying to do. Just win the battles every day, win the small battles every day, and eventually one day we'll get the justice that we deserve. But yeah, that's all we can do. So just keep going, keep going. Anyone who loses hope, just keep going, day by day, step by step. It doesn't have to be big wins; it could be little wins every day. But we're getting it. Then things are changing. I can see the change in public perspective. The amount of kafirs I see people wearing, the amount of chants all around the world of free Palestine. These things I never would have imagined in my lifetime, but here we are. So I think just keep up. What you're doing, what I'm doing. Everyone has a role to play. Everyone has a role to play. So just keep doing you. Keep doing you. Keep doing the roles. Block out the negativity and the people that say that things can't be done, because the ones that say it can't be done, they're never the ones that were going to change anything anyway. So yeah, we just got to do what we got to do.
correct. I was going to ask you, doctor, how brave are the medical workers, the Palestinian medical workers that are in ambulances pulling everybody out, the rubble out there in Gaza? Pretty. I
Yeah,
mean, I've seen
just
videos. I've seen. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. The things that you see online, just based on what they post, is some of the craziest footage I've ever seen in my life. Like, there's
yeah,
just nothing, and I just see them smiling, and then being able. It's just. It makes you look at life in a whole different perspective.
yeah, man. I used to jump in those ambulances with them. They used to pick me up sometimes, and sometimes we used to transfer patients in those ambulances. Obviously, none of this was authorized, but I remember just having a sense of fear, when I'd go in because I was just like, I don't know whether the ambulance is going to be bombed or not as we're going from one place to another. But I remember, I remember chatting to them and you know, the bravery of these people, the bravery. There's an aura around them, those paramedics. There's an aura around them. So I just wanted to be around them. I just wanted to be around them because I just felt that there was barakah around them. I just felt there was something special about these people, that these people had angels around them. And I just wanted to be around them just to experience some of that. You can't put into words what it's like getting in the back of an ambulance, right? And driving where the bombs are going off and just driving and leaving everything to Allah. It's the ultimate sacrifice that they have to make that conscious decision. Every time they get in an ambulance, they make that decision that they're making the ultimate sacrifice, that they could be making the ultimate sacrifice. And they do that every day, and they do that every day without hesitation. You know, when we would hear a bomb go off and the paramedics would be in the hospital, you know, just dropping off a patient or something, you would see them running into the ambulance, and I'm looking at them going like, there's not even a pause. They're not even pausing just to be like, oh my God, like, you know, let me call my mum. Let me just, you know what I mean? They're just running into the ambulance because they know they need to get there straight away. They can hear the bombs going up and they know they need to get there. And I just look at that and I just go like, there's just no fear. None, like, you know, to run that quickly and get into the back of an ambulance, you know, it's something else. So, you know, I take my hats off to them. You know, like I say, special human beings. There's so many of these special human beings in Gaza and everywhere. So, you know, alhamdulillah.
How did it feel walking the streets of Gaza when you were able to buy like small little treats and
Yeah, yeah,
and
man. It
then
was,
I saw one of
I mean,
your
look, in the
other
back of,
doctor friends. I guess he bought some peppers.
yeah, yeah. So, you know, look, some of them wouldn't venture out too far. You know, there would just be the stalls outside the
Uh-huh.
hospital they'd go to. Some of them wouldn't even leave the hospital grounds. Some doctors wouldn't even leave the hospital grounds. And then obviously there was people like me who was going out and doing breakfast runs and like getting falafel sandwiches and like going right into the heart of the city. Do you know what I mean? And getting like falafel sandwiches and stuff like that in the morning and like, do you know what I mean? Like I was doing stuff like that and like obviously you shouldn't you're not allowed to do it, you know what I mean, but I was like, I want to live life amongst these people, you know what I mean. And then like, you know, you'd go out, I get my hair cut at the barbers. Do you know what I mean? I would go to the barber shop getting my hair cut, you know, like it just, you know, it was like
On a lot,
subhanallah, man,
I mean,
like
it's
it's
still
just,
life even when they're going through all that. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, man, like, you know,
it's
I wanted to rub off that energy, you know, like, and subhanallah, alhamdulillah, I got to experience being in Gaza with the people of Gaza, living life, you know, normally like them, just going to the market and getting breakfast in the morning, getting your hair cut, you know, going to the mosque to go pray. You know what I mean? Like, I got to do
And
all of those things.
you said the drones are nonstop out there, correct? You
They're
said the drones are
non-stop. They're
nonstop. They're
non-stop. You hear them
constantly.
overhead. You just hear them overhead. Like they're literally over your head. You can see them over your head, like the drones. So, you know, but you know, I would just say to myself, you know, like these guys, you just have to tawakkul. Like if it's your time, it's your time. But, you know, I needed to get some falafel sandwiches, you know what I mean? Or I needed to get some hummus, or I needed to get some treats for the doctors in the hospital. You know, sometimes I'd go and I'd get some treats for the doctors, you know, just because like they'd be working late nights and, you know, sometimes, you know, these people were coming from tents and they maybe wouldn't have eaten anything for days. You know, the only food that they get is when they're in the hospital. So I'd make sure I'd bring them sweets and biscuits and coffee and tea and stuff like that. So I make sure they're all looked after and stuff. So yeah, so alhamdulillah, man, like, you know, we alhamdulillah, I got a bit of a different take from everybody else, I think, in Gaza, because, you know, me and a few other doctors who were a bit more adventurous, you could say. You know, we pushed the rules a little bit, but you know, we did that to experience to help. You know, like getting in the back of an ambulance to transport somebody. We're just trying to help. We're just trying to transport them. Obviously, there's no guarantees, but alhamdulillah, you know what I mean.
So I know death and destruction was pretty much around on every corner.
Mm.
How many close calls did you get based on where you were stationed at the hospital?
I mean, you know, like, there was plenty of times where like they were bombed, like, you know, the hospital grounds were bombed, the hospital area was bombed, where I was staying a few hundred meters were bombed, you know, like there's plenty of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of that stuff happens, like, do you know what I mean? A lot of that stuff happens. So look, you could get caught up in the danger that you're constantly in, or you can get on with your work, and I just try to get on with my work.
And Doc, I do have a question for you. I mean, you probably don't hear this one often, but how do you feel? I mean, are you okay? Are you doing all right?
Do you know, like, obviously when I first arrived and I was doing my interviews, there was a lot of tears. I was crying a lot, right? I've tried to scale back, like talking about like, the actual individual cases and patients and things like that, because it's hard to relive that trauma every day, but obviously I'm trying to get the word out and stuff, it has been hard. And, I did an interview the other day, like on Swedish radio or something like that. And, he asked me a question and it made me remember something that I hadn't talked about, and it made me cry again. And I remember just thinking to myself after it, I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, damn man, I've got a lot of things I need to work through. There's a lot of things that are affecting me here that I just don't know about, you know what I mean, or I haven't explored. I know that it will get to me. And I remember one of the doctors, he's been there twice. He was a doctor that works with me. He's an Australian guy, like fully Australian. And, he'd been to Gaza for 2 months. And, he said to me, like, he goes, from time to time, it still comes. He goes, he was at hospital and he heard a child like running through the corridor and screaming, just playing. And he goes, and it made him freeze for about 30, 40 seconds because he was just remembering the screams in Gaza. And he said, like, I thought it didn't affect me. He goes, but I've been getting those things. And like, I don't like to dwell on it too much because I'm not the victim. The victim of those people in Gaza, not me. I was there for a period of time. But I think, for us, like, because we're not there long enough, we don't accept that reality. Over there in Gaza, they've accepted that reality. That's why, like, to them, it can become normal to them, but it's not normal to us. And like, it's not normal to see 30 children dead just on the floor, bleeding out to death. It's not normal to see that. It's not normal to see children with limbs missing. It's not normal to have children screaming out in pain, full body burns, and you not be able to even give them any painkillers. These things aren't normal to experience. And subhanallah, like, I just make sure that my deen is okay, and that my connection with Allah is okay, and that's the only way you get through it.
What do you think needs to be done right now? As of right now, what do you think needs to be done
I just think people need
to
to be
fix?
brave. People need to be brave. People need to speak out and be brave. Um, it's hard. It's hard being brave. It's hard speaking out. I know how hard it is. But on the day of judgment, we're all going to get asked what we did. We're all going to get asked what we did, and I just hope everybody can live with themselves that that they can say I did this or I did that. Not everybody has to be a hero. Not everybody has to do something outrageous, but you've got to do something. You've got to do something. You've got to do something. So just do what you're blessed with. If you're blessed with talking and
So I think you cut off, Doc. I think you're cutting off. I don't know why I don't hear you no more.
uh, just do what you're blessed
There you
with.
go.
There are people that are blessed with stuff. People are blessed with different skills and different strengths. Just use whatever your strength is and use that to help. Whether it's donating money, whether it's speaking out, whether it's being academic about this, whatever it is, just do what you've got to do. So alhamdulillah, we all have to try our best, and that's all I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to do my best, and hopefully, my intention stays pure. That's the thing that I worry about the most is my intention. So inshallah, my intention stays pure, and we can make a positive change.
Inshallah, inshallah. Well, Doctor, I don't want to take too much of your time. I do appreciate you coming out. I felt very compelled when I saw your videos. I felt like I had to speak to you. The second I saw your videos, I mean, I teared up right away. I cried right away
Um,
on a few of them. I reached out automatically, so I do appreciate that you did give me your time. And
it's all good, man.
inshallah,
It's all good.
we're all going to be following you. We're all
Yeah.
going to be following your journey.
Um,
You're a batal, habibi, batal.
um,
That's what you
honestly,
are.
I'm not. Honestly, I'm
Don't
not.
let
I'm not.
anybody take anything away from you.
Honestly, man, I'm not. There's so many. I think the difference is that I'm just sharing what I experienced. There's a lot of people that don't want to share what they experience just because of whether it's the trauma to them or whether it's scared of speaking out. But I came to that conclusion where like I just don't want to feel helpless anymore. I want to say something. So I'm not a hero. There are many more skilled doctors than I am that did so many more amazing things than I could do out there. I'm just a normal person like everybody else. I'm just using whatever abilities I have to get the message out.
Absolutely, Dr. Mo. Well, we appreciate you. Honestly, thank you, sir.
يلا
Appreciate it.
الله يخليك. يلا
Let's
السلام
get this
عليكم.
right here. Alaikum salam.